I didn't think comparison could feel like erosion. Not an explosion, not a fight, just wearing down. It started small, a sentence here, a comment there, the kind you tell yourself doesn't matter. She used to do it differently, she'd say, or he always understood that part of me. At first, I laughed it off. Everyone has a past. I told myself I wasn't competing with ghosts. But after a while, I noticed how often the ghost showed up. Not just in arguments, in jokes, in casual moments, in silence. And the worst part wasn't that she talked about her ex. It was how she talked about me through him. Like I was a rough draft of someone she already finished reading. I started wondering if I was failing some test I never signed up for. And every time I tried to ask her about it, she'd tilt her head and say, "You're being sensitive." Maybe I was, softly, or maybe I was finally paying attention. Because comparison doesn't always sound cruel. Sometimes it sounds reasonable. And that's what scared me the most. We'd been together a little over a year when it became impossible to ignore. Long enough to feel settled, short enough to still second guess yourself. We didn't meet in some dramatic way. No sparks flying across a crowded room. It was quiet, familiar, easy. She liked that about us. Or at least, she said she did. I believed her because I wanted to. She was thoughtful in small ways. Remembered how I took my coffee. Left notes on the fridge. But those moments lived alongside others. Moments where she'd sigh if I didn't react fast enough. Or correct how I told a story. "Mark would have handled that better," she'd say, like she was offering advice. Mark, I knew his name before I knew her favorite color. She said they ended things years ago. No drama, just different paths. That should have been reassuring. Instead, it made me wonder why he still has so much space in our present. I told myself I was overthinking, that love means compromise. But compromise shouldn't feel like erasure. And every time I tried to ask her about it, she'd tilt her head and say, "You're being sensitive." Maybe I was, softly, or maybe I was finally paying attention. Because comparison doesn't always sound cruel. Sometimes it sounds reasonable, and that's what scared me the most. Ju-I-O-9-0 Wes 8T7R. The comparisons weren't always negative. That almost made them worse. Sometimes she'd smile and say, "You remind me of him when you do that," as if it was a compliment. I never knew how to respond. Thank you? I'm sorry? There's a strange loneliness in being praised for someone else's shadow. I started adjusting myself without realizing it, choosing words more carefully, second-guessing reactions, trying to anticipate what version of me would measure up. When I asked her why she brought him up so often, she shrugged. "He was a big part of my life," she said. "It doesn't mean anything." But meaning isn't always intentional. Sometimes it's cumulative. I wondered if she noticed the way I went quiet afterward, or how I stopped sharing certain thoughts because I didn't want them weighed against someone else's memory. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations, looking for the moment where I fell short. And every time, I told myself to do better. I never asked if she was willing to meet me where I was. Things shifted the first time we fought about it. Not a loud fight, the kind that simmers. I told her I felt like I was being compared to someone I could never be. She rolled her eyes. Not dramatically, just enough. "I'm not comparing," she said. "I'm just pointing things out." That sentence stuck with me. Pointing things out implies improvement, correction, as if I was a project. She accused me of insecurity, of projecting my own fears onto her words. And maybe she was right. I wasn't exactly confident by then. But confidence doesn't vanish on its own. It gets chipped away. We made up without resolving anything. Like placing a fragile object back on the shelf and hoping it wouldn't fall again. For a while, things were calm. But calm can be deceptive. Sometimes it's just the quiet before something finally breaks. The comparisons evolved. They became more specific, more personal. He used to check in more. He wouldn't have forgotten that date. He listened differently. Each comment landed like a small verdict. I started keeping score without meaning to, counting how many times his name came up in a week, not because I was jealous, but because I was tired of feeling like I was auditioning for a role already cast. I suggested couples counseling once. She laughed. "We're not that bad," she said. Bad enough, apparently, to keep a third presence between us. I began to feel like I was in a relationship with two people, one physically there, one permanently referenced, and only one of them was allowed to be imperfect. Around that time, she became more protective of her phone. Not secretive, just guarded, turning the screen away, taking calls in the other room. I noticed, then told myself not to. I didn't want to be that person, the suspicious one. But suspicion isn't born from nothing. It grows in gaps, in unanswered questions, in the space where reassurance should be. When I asked her if everything was okay, she smiled too quickly. "Of course," she said, and I wanted to believe her, because believing her was easier than what came next. The breaking point didn't come from a fight. It came from a comment at dinner. We were out with friends, laughing, relaxed. She leaned over and said, casually, "Mark always loved this place." No context, no reason, just inserted. Something in me snapped. Not outwardly, internally. I smiled through the rest of the night, but inside, I was done pretending. When we got home, I asked her why she still talked to him. She froze, just for a second, then said, "I don't." The lie wasn't dramatic. That's how I knew it was practiced. I didn't confront her right away. I needed to be sure. That's what I told myself. But the truth was, I was afraid of what I'd find. One night, while she was asleep, her phone lit up. A name I recognized. No heart emojis. No obvious flirtation. Just familiarity. Years of it. Conversations that never ended. Just paused. I didn't scroll far. I didn't need to. The timestamps told me everything. This wasn't recent. This wasn't accidental. This was ongoing. And suddenly, the comparisons made sense. Not fully, but enough to hurt. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. That surprised me. She looked relieved, almost grateful, like the secret was heavy. She said they never stopped talking, that he understood her in ways I didn't, that it wasn't cheating because it was just emotional. I didn't know how to respond to that. Emotional betrayal still leaves bruises. She said she compared me because she was confused, trying to figure out what she wanted, as if I was part of a pros and cons list. I asked why she stayed with me. She said, "Because you're safe." That word echoed. Safe, not loved, not chosen. Safe. We didn't break up that night. We sat there, processing. She cried. I didn't. I think I was too numb. She promised to cut contact, to focus on us, and part of me wanted to believe her, because leaving felt like admitting I'd wasted time. So I stayed, but something had shifted. Every comparison now sounded like a confession. Every memory of him felt like competition I never agreed to. I realized I'd been living in a constant state of self-doubt, trying to outperform someone who was never gone. Weeks passed. She tried harder. More affection, more reassurance. But trust doesn't reset that easily. Then I found out the final piece. The part she never told me, Mark wasn't just an ex. He was married, and she had been the almost he couldn't let go of. That's why she compared, because she was measuring me against a life she couldn't have, a version of herself she never became, and I was collateral. When I confronted her with that, she went quiet. No excuses left. She said she never meant to hurt me, that she didn't realize how deep it went, but realization doesn't undo damage. I asked her if she loved me. She hesitated. That was my answer. I left a week later. No screaming, no ultimatums. Just a quiet ending. Sometimes that hurts more. I still think about her. about the version of me I became trying to earn something I shouldn't have had to. I wonder if I ignored the signs because I wanted to be chosen. Now I ask myself a different question. Was I wrong for staying as long as I did? For doubting myself instead of the situation? Or was I just human, hoping love would eventually choose me back? So here's the dilemma. If someone keeps comparing you to their past, is it insecurity to feel threatened? Or intuition trying to warn you? Because sometimes comparison isn't about improvement, it's about unfinished business. And the cost is paid by the person who didn't even know they were part of it. Would you have stayed longer or left the first time your name was measured against someone else's memory?